Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our next presentation of the day. Super excited to invite back once again for I don't even know how many times you've joined us, Geeta. Many times over the years.
Yes.
Yes, so Geeta Pyne is joining us, Chief Architect at TIAA. Geeta is presenting from India. She's on her vacation, but she's so dedicated to the architecture community that she is joining us anyway. It's very late at night. So yeah, a big thank you, Geeta, for joining us once again. And if you can just put your presentation into presentation mode, that would be great. Wonderful.
Okay. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, perfect. All good. So I won't take up any more of your time. Welcome back. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Good morning. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I mean, as Philip said, I think nothing gives me more joy than talking about architecture and this community. And thank you to SofaSummits for organizing this, and along with Chief Architect Network. So topic for today is evolving enterprise architecture to stay relevant in a rapidly changing world, right? So I'm just going to talk first a little bit about how I am relevant in this, in this changing world. So my name is Geeta Pyne. Thank you, Philip, for introducing. I am the chief architect for TIAA, which is a 100 years old company. We are in the business of retirement, asset management, wealth management, and manage about $1.4 trillion asset under management. And I have been with the company for about 2.5 years. But prior to this, I have, lived across primarily two countries, India and US. And I started my job talking about change and staying relevant. I started my, first job as a computer science engineer back in India 3 decades back in India's space research organization. And I dealt with satellite data, large scale data, large volume of data, making sense of data. And we used to talk a lot of expert system, knowledge based systems back then. Fast forward today, we are talking about AI, we are talking about agentic AI. But I think I have been touching and feeling this, data literally from space to Earth and anywhere in between. And specific to architecture role, enterprise architect, I have been practicing enterprise architects. I tell that a rookie engineer turning into an architect since, more than 2 decades across when I used to work at a distributor called Arrow Electronics. So with that being said, hopefully it gives you I have some scars under my belt that I wanted to share that what I have done, what I'm doing, and just, probably learn more from this community. So today, since the talk is about staying relevant in a rapidly changing world, I'm going to frame my conversation into this four quadrant. The rate of change that we know, change has always been there, and architects, as we know, operate in the second derivative. But I think the rate of change that we see now, we haven't seen this kind of change, right? So what do we do as the organizations need to adapt? No organizations will be left unless they want to be disrupted and go off the grid. They will have to adapt and change with this, exponential change that is happening right now. And we, on the other hand, as enterprise architects, also have to change and have to make sure that the way, when I started 20 years back as an enterprise architect, I used to draw a multi-year roadmap. I used to draw the blueprint. I used to do standards and principles that used to be durable, right? But fast forward now, I can't run architecture as the same way I ran 20 years back, 10 years back, 5 years back. So, how are we all adapting this to become really from a design time static to becoming a runtime, really navigating the organization, being that dynamic compass and delivering that ultimately the target state? Then what is the shift we all are going through? Again, regardless of this is what I think is the most fascinating and exciting part, regardless of what industry you are in, like me in retirement, wealth, asset management, or any of financial services to anything in high tech. everybody, we are going through this agentic transformation, because this is about reimagining, identifying, redefining the entire workflows, how would we organize ourselves, the skills needed for tomorrow, the workforces of the tomorrow. And last but not the least, I think, which is our fiduciary responsibility as enterprise architect, is how do we ensure that we are not adding a pile of technical debt just by because we are bringing this all these new technologies in with with AI, with agentic, with the cost of computing and everything in between, and not just show through the lens of the technical debt through the tech, but also through the business outcomes. So basically, how do we start architecting the future and create a velocity? And this intent, from intent to actual execution or outcome, how do we bridge the gap? So that's what I'm just going to talk in the next 20 minutes or so. So what's this narrative going to be? As I said, the four things, like we'll talk about the shift, we'll talk about the agentic turn. I'll talk about, I think one of the things that I'm really happy about that I can bring to fruition my vision that I had years back is really this digital thing, twin, the living organization, which is our enterprise architecture is living and breathing. And also the human element. I think earlier talk, somebody was talking about this whole human element. How do we ensure, while we leverage the agents, while we leverage the machines, while we use all sorts of automation to make us productive and transform, we need to make sure that humans are still in the control and the driving and thinking through, right? How do we do that? Continuously, again, tech remediation, tech debt remediation, and what is our call to action? So with that, like the brief around the shift, right? I mean, I've already mentioned, right, what is the shift that we are all going through? And this is something I talk to everybody is how we are taking this, like, okay, everything has to be perfect. We need to know everything, cross, all every the little details to understand, to create the multi-year roadmap, and making sure we have a very definitive plan before we can make progress, to being agile, being able to make those flexible choices. And I think this, again, the distance or the time and the speed between intent and execution, the strategic thinking to execution is really shrinking, limit tending towards zero almost. So, how do we build this thing? And this is a mindset change for architects, for all architects, enterprise architect, business architect, technical architect, data architect, you name it. Architecture is a mindset. It is not a particular caste or character. It is the way of thinking. And we all have to think this in the current reality. And the other aspect of it, we used to spend, as I said, I used to spend time in creating really, really strong, very good blueprints that used to, test the time, used to last. Now I don't anymore as much. I just do a sketch and then I use data-driven architecture to really use the machine to create the architecture of tomorrow, right? Because we know as soon as the code is shipped, the code becomes legacy and the design becomes outdated. So this is one something that we need to do. And while doing this shift is the technology shift with the agentic, as we have all seen, we have been doing automation. I think any architect, like I'm very lazy. So every time I had to do any repetitive task, we are automating. So automation is not new. What is new is how we are getting from the simple chatbot to being an assistant to really being an autonomous agent, right? Treating them as a first class citizen of the enterprise. They are a part of a software asset. How do we organize them? They are part of our organization chart. But I think, again, enterprise architects are extremely responsible and plays an anchor role to rethink and reimagine how our operating models will change, how our business models are going to change, how are we going to think about organization structure. I just saw, we have all seen, I'm sure, we have read several papers that, it is easy to do a POC, it is easy to do a pilot, but doing something at scale it is very hard, and not some organizations are failing because, to me, in my simple mind, we are not thinking the right way to solve the right problem, and we are going after. And I saw this. I think BlackRock, which is again 100+ years old company, manages multi-trillion-dollar assets. They just redefined their operating model, threw away their organization structure. And if 100-year-old company, 200 years old company can reimagine, I think nothing should be stopping us from rethinking reimagining, right? Then the second part of the agentic is, of course, to stay relevant is how are we taking our current, most companies are doing brownfield implementations. How do we take our existing layered stack to really make it ready to be an enterprise agentic stack? AI is, one of the parts. I'm showing you a few layers here. In my organization, I have 7-layer stack, just like we learned back in the days, OSI, 7-layer OSI model. We still follow the 7-layer model, and we can't just sprinkle AI. So we have to rethink. So to me, every layer, right from digital to interaction layer, to integration layer, to the data layer, to the orchestration layer, to the, every layer is, to the underlying infrastructure layer is getting, disrupted. And I think we as an enterprise architect have to be really thoughtful about how we are bringing this in. Think about, I think this is like a vertically integrated and horizontally scalable architecture, because again, just like the distance and the speed and the time between a strategic decision to execution is reducing, same like, in order to do that, the access path from the interaction to the underlying infrastructure, from the integration, the orchestration to the API, to the right posture of the security, to the underlying infrastructure is really coming. So truly a super, super hyper converged, integrated stack is something that we need to think about. The, modern data stack is already old, and how do we start building it? And again, why is it important for enterprise architecture, and how does it matter for rapidly changing? Not all things we can nail down day one. Like, for example, agent registry is a very important concept. Everything has to be registered. You may or may not have an like the industry spec yet. How can we do at a short and a long, decision with no harm? And I think fundamentally, again, this is where architecture thinking is really making us relevant, is because of building this for decades, we know what good software architecture looks like. The fundamentals of abstraction, the fundamentals of layers of separations and layers of concerns, the fundamentals of those basic identity, security, authentication, authorizations really becomes very, very critical. And then blended in all the observability, being able to understand, dynamically observe the behavior and take actions. Now, from the agentic, talking about dynamic, and this is the another aspect I think very, very critical and getting real, is really representing the design time and the run time coming together to truly represent a design to like digital twin. And of course, all the work we are doing today and talking, AI is fundamental. You will know that I'm using AI loosely because not all things need to be agentic. There is a place for basic, machine learning. There is a place for generative AI. There is a place for agentic. So we architects also have to pave the way to say when to use what is the right tool for right, problem solving, so that we do not incur a huge tech debt at the end of the day, right? So ensuring, this is again an extremely important concept, like how do we start thinking through what's my architecture that I intend to design versus what is actually the reality. And case in point, right now as we speak, I'm using this and also in a conversational way to talk to this my knowledge graph, to this talk to my digital twin, by asking questions around what's happening in production, which incident, when an incident A happens, what system application might be impacted, which are the underlying systems that might be impacted, which business might be impacted, which customer segments. This is nothing new, but what is new is being able to go to one place, talk in simple language, democratize that, make it accessible to non-technical people to query and understand your digital twin and architecture to be able to answer those questions, right? So use all of this. Now we can accelerate this to observe this, whether it is the logs in Splunk or Signal Effects or Dynatrace, name it, name your poison, which tools you want. We can correlate. We can use AI. I mean, I think I heard in the previous conversation, we keep talking about the criticality of data being right. And I think while I would advocate for that, at the same time, I would say use AI to combat AI, use AI to clean up data, use AI to make sense of fragmented, disparate sources of data across. But doesn't matter if it's structured, unstructured. Do I have a transaction ID? We can have ultimately a human in the loop to be able to make sure we are making the right calls. That's what I think. One of the things I would say, if we can do one thing as architect, help us breach, create this twin, and twins actually depending on what kind of question and answer we need a looking to answer, what insights do you need to do based on the perspective, based on the viewpoints, create the subsequent twins, create your knowledge graph, connect truly. This is the time to truly theory that we learned throughout any architecture framework to come to reality and bring to execution. From here onwards, like since we are talking about agentic and we talked about creating velocity, we talked about reducing the time from intent to execution, we got to think about guardrails versus gates. I think we all grew up, even the software, SDLC cycle has a tons of gates, but let's instead of gates, let's use the guardrails so that make sure that we are not the blocker, but we are creating the paved roads that creates velocity and make it so easy to do the right thing and make it difficult to do the wrong thing. But do that in a very collaborative way where agents can operate things that we already know, things that our guardrails are codified, using that the agents can do the first level of operations and the governance and then operate that with humans. So we as chief architects or senior architects, let's operate those agents to do our job much better, more effectively, efficiently, and use also the agents as a feedback loop to ensure that we are able to orchestrate in this agentic age both human and AI intelligence, right? Then ensuring that we are not adding further tech debt, right? So make sure, how would we ensure basic things? We approve the design, architecturally correct, thinking through, but by the time it goes to production, it might have drifted. We always knew this. Like drift is the most interesting signal, is what I normally say, right? So now we can actually breach that drift, and we can actually see what's really happening and how our organizations are behaving is by observing this production observations and then using that as a feedback loop to correct the drift and make it a continuous correction and continuous feedback loop. Sometimes we might not have known the right architecture design to recommend, and that can be also corrected. So that's as a part of the design date. But then also, how can we think about, hey, we all, like especially companies that are, legacy for decades, they have infrastructure that might have been end of life, that might have software, that have duplicate, software. That could be at any form factor. It could be in the cost. We might have several software doing the same thing. So there is a cost of doing that. Or it could be because you have vulnerability, ultimately leading to risk. That is also a tech debt and which could directly lead to financial debt. And the other forms of debt. Now we can have agents to observe, understand what should be the actual real, what's actually the drifting, what are the types of debt we may not know, and then inform, and then we can course correct. The other thing I did not mention, while doing this debt correction and simplification and rationalization, we will, uncover either cycles or capabilities or cost that can be now repurposed to provide new business values, right? And this way of understanding through the digital twin, the ontology and the actual representation, we would also understand what capabilities the organization is missing. If the business wants to do X and we don't have all the abilities, we can actually, through data driven, we can identify, and we can then create a simulation before even we actually execute that. We can simulate what might be the behavior and bring all this to bear, right? And lastly, so what's our call to action, right? Really is, I haven't told anything that you did not know, but I think it just gets us grounded, that all things that we have learned through good architecture, right, and good architectural practice. So I would say, find your variance, create your digital twin, start small, take one value stream, one business process, go all the way to the end, wrangle all the tribal knowledge, wrangle everything that you have in the organization, but focus on building the foundation, start formalizing your stack, build the agentic, governance model, and then build your, adaptive governance. Let's stop being this blocker. Let's stop being the gate, and let's create, build, operations is a mirror for architecture. That has been my mantra for several decades. Now, this is where we live and breathe in. Architecture does not start in the shift left in the all the way. It is a continuum, and that let's make that happen. And so, with that, again, my name is Geeta Pyne, and to me, it is time to switch to the living enterprise. I have my QR code. When Philip shares the slide, feel free to, talk to me, contact me, and thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We've got 1 minute for one question here from Lisa. How do you continue to engage with leadership to continue to show the value of architecture with a push to AI for everything without human in the loop? I like the concept of having a digital twin to democratize some of the responsibilities an architect owns. I think human in the loop is critical, as you mentioned, but love agents being leveraged to represent us.
Yeah, 100%. So I would say number one is I have created what I call like an opportunity index. So not everything is equal. So very simple way, like a map. What is AI good at? What is agentic AI good at? And what is your business? Do a marriage between the two and just lighten up the map. So when business comes with a use case, just figure it out. Okay, is this a problem? What is the right way to solve? And then showing on the other side, what are the dangers or the risks of when you have no supervision, no human, until like what is the kind of readiness? So I did not mention, we have created a framework for what does it mean to be autonomous agent and the readiness of that. So we have 4 stages of agents, going from assisted to augmented to adaptive to autonomous. And I shared that very clearly. Are we ready from technology, people, process? And based on that, let's make a very good judgment call. If you do X, are we ready? And here are the implications, but there are always trade-offs. Just having those, and it is, you mentioned about leadership continuous, engagement continuously. But do not go with a say that we cannot. I always go with the other options of how might we still solve that. And here are the choices. And it is not never, it is not now, but it and when this will be ready. So I also lay out a path when I'll be ready, when the organization will be ready for autonomous.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, apologies to those that have sent in questions, but we are at time now. But please do reach out to Geeta. I'm sure she'll be more than happy to continue the conversation.
Absolutely. And Philip, if you have the questions, feel free to take a screenshot, email me. You have my contact, and I would love to. Thank you so much.
Will do. All right. Thank you, Geeta.